Hey everybody, this is Dan Reeser, joined by Terry Lam and Betty Chen. Um, Betty and I are from the Acala team, and Terry is very close to being on the Acala team. We consider him almost part of the team at this point, but he's on the Nuts Finance team building Tapio and as well as Pike, which we kind of announced a couple weeks ago. Yeah, Terry, I got to finally meet Terry a couple weeks ago in Berlin, and then Betty, unfortunately, I still haven't met, believe it or not, after knowing her over 2 years. So maybe we'll make that happen soon. But if you guys, maybe Terry, you can start off giving a quick intro to yourself, and then we can get into the topics for the day.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I'm one of the co-founders of the Nuts Finance team. So Nuts Finance is basically the development lab behind Tapio as well as Pike. I guess our experience and bread and butter is within the financial primitives, protocols, building on top of layer ones. So we started working with the Acala team 16 months ago. And so far, it's been a really good experience, sharing, learning from you guys, as well as just clashing in terms of ideas on what are some of the financial primitives that we could help build out. So, yeah, I'm excited to be very close working with you guys, as well as sharing with your community.
Awesome, thanks. And Betty, for those of you who don't know you, I think we've got some fans in the chat, but if you want to give a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. Nice to see people showing up here. It's Betty. I'm actually calling in from Sydney right now. Also one of the co-founder at Acala, and then been building with Acala team for a long time now. And then it's great to now we have new member in the ecosystem, similar to the Acala team as very serious builders, and then try to create new innovations in the space. Try to bring DOT adoption as well as Web3 adoption to the mass market. So yeah, we'll touch quite a bit of that today with liquid staking. So yeah, so let's get rolling.
Cool. And just so everyone knows, so we're gonna go. I'm actually not totally sure how long we'll go, but we're gonna save time for questions. I'm guessing we'll probably be finished in about a half hour. And then we'll save time to go through the questions at the bottom. So if you have questions, you can ask them in the ask a question box at the bottom. And I also made a poll. If you guys don't mind filling out that poll, I'm just interested in who's currently using LDOT, and then if not, interested in maybe what the reasoning would be as far as like maybe you need more education or you don't hold DOT yourself or other things. So that's it. And then yeah, I'm Dan Reeser from the Acala team. Been working quite a bit with Betty on some of these products that we're going to talk about today. So excited to share more. So agenda-wise, so of course the main topic is around DOT, DOT staking, and then as well as DOT derivatives, including TDOT, which Terry's going to cover. It was kind of funny. Just yesterday or the day before, we posted a tweet about TDOT, and people started asking, "Oh, another DOT derivative, another letter in front of DOT." And what we're trying to communicate here is that that's the whole point of TDOT. TDOT is solving this problem where there's all these different kind of flavors and types of DOT, and above all of them will be TDOT, kind of compiling them all together in one synthetic DOT token. So anyway, excited to see Terry get into a little bit more detail on TDOT. But before that, I'm going to go into a little bit around staking. I know people on this call probably aware of what staking is, but I thought it would make sense to maybe start with this as just a little bit of context. So of course, as many people probably know, Bitcoin uses proof of work, which requires heavy amount of computational power, lots of energy, which is getting some attention recently, and requires basically these nodes or these computers to do math to solve this, essentially a math problem. And then whoever is able to accomplish that, first of all, contributes their computational power to helping secure and validate the accuracy and validity of transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. And then they're rewarded with actual Bitcoin for that work. On the other hand, proof of stake is kind of the next generation of how different blockchains are securing themselves. So Polkadot, as well as ETH2 and many other blockchains out there now, are using proof of stake, which differs just a little bit from the way Bitcoin operates. So with proof of stake, there's also nodes, just like with Bitcoin, but these are validator nodes. And instead of doing these very complex math problems, they're holding large amounts of crypto that they use to help secure the network and prevent people from cheating, like double spending. They prevent people from hacking the network, taking over the network, and so on. And when these validators are chosen by Polkadot in this case, they actually help to do the same type of thing as Bitcoin miners do. They help to secure and validate the accuracy of these transactions and make sure that everything is kind of aligned as far as, does their ledger match what other ledgers on other validators are saying? Does everyone agree? And for doing that work, that validator receives, in Polkadot's case, DOT tokens as a reward for their contribution to helping secure the blockchain. And people like you and me, if we're not running a validator ourselves, we can participate by contributing our own stake, our own dots in this case, to one of these validators who's running the node to increase the amount of stake that is in that validator, which then in turn helps them earn more rewards. And for contributing to those validators, you and I get some of that return that those validators are earning by helping to secure the network. So then that brings me to what is liquid staking and what kind of problems is liquid staking trying to solve? One thing that many people know is that when you're staking tokens on any of these blockchains, but Polkadot in particular, you're staking your DOT, and your DOT is essentially locked away and really doing nothing after that point besides earning around 14%. So there is an opportunity cost there of not having those tokens anymore to then be able to go use for maybe earning additional yield or using it for anything that you'd like. Polkadot in particular also has a very long unstaking, otherwise known as unbonding period. So as soon as you decide, hey, I want to either like maybe take my DOT out, maybe sell some, or do whatever you want with your DOT, it takes 28 days for that to come back to you. Which is difficult for people who maybe need access to that liquidity sooner than that. For those of you who've been around the Polkadot ecosystem for a while, we all know that the user experience with Polkadot.js and all the kind of like more hardcore Polkadot staking is never kind of easy to use, which also is related to the last bullet point here around choosing validators. So with kind of traditional Polkadot staking, you have to go through and pick validators, kind of try it your best to figure out which statistics to look at, how to decide on which one's better, who do you trust. It's a lot to kind of wrap your head around and kind of a lot of work in maintaining that. And then last, for people who, I know a lot of these funds have quite a bit of DOT, but also many of us don't have tens, hundreds of millions of dollars. So some people need a lower minimum to be able to participate in this kind of economy with staking. So Polkadot itself, unfortunately, has a little bit of a higher minimum to get in. So the barrier to entry for being able to stake is a bit higher in this case. So we want to look to solve this problem. So with liquid staking, I think a good example of what liquid staking is, you can kind of compare it to a coat check. If you're familiar with, maybe you go to a restaurant, it's cold, you walk in and there's a coat check where they offer you, hey, give us your coat, we'll hold it for you while you eat dinner. And here's a little ticket, number 86, that you can keep in your pocket while you eat dinner and then go do whatever you want. You can shake hands, have a drink, have dinner, come back at the end of the dinner and give them back that number 86 and they'll give you back your coat. The same thing works the same thing kind of applies to liquid staking, where you come into, in this case, Acala with your DOT, and you stake your DOT in Acala, and you receive back this receipt, just like that number 86 ticket. You receive LDOT in this case, which is kind of a receipt token representing that DOT that you gave to the Acala protocol itself. So that DOT is there earning 14, or actually in Acala's case around 19%. And you then also have this LDOT token that's liquid, meaning you can go use it to earn additional yield in DeFi, whether that's on Acala or in the future, anything across the Polkadot or Kusama ecosystem, and even external to that. But the cool thing is, while you have that LDOT, you're still earning staking rewards on that original DOT that you've staked with the Acala protocol. And then one other question that we kind of get sometimes is, well, is this unsafe for Polkadot if you're taking all this DOT off of the Polkadot relay chain and no longer helping do what staking's purpose is, which is securing Polkadot's blockchain? And that's absolutely not. It's definitely in Acala's best interest to help keep Polkadot as secure as possible, because we don't do our own security. Acala gets our security from Polkadot. So we need Polkadot to be as secure as possible. So all the DOT that's staked on Acala is essentially pooled together in this almost like meta staking pool. And then using cross consensus messaging, or XCM, Polkadot or Acala itself then stakes all of that DOT back on the Polkadot relay chain with a variety of different validators, hence securing Polkadot with all the DOT staked on Acala. Here's kind of a visual for how that looks. So DOT comes in from any user like you and me, and like I said, goes back and is staked on Polkadot. And then what's generated from that is this LDOT token, which is today around 19.9%. What this does is it unlocks liquidity, of course, so you're no longer kind of stuck with your DOT just stuck there doing nothing. You can unstake instantly if you want. There's a small fee for that, but you can get liquidity up front instead of waiting the 28 days. Although you can also, I'll get on this on the next slide, but you can also wait the traditional kind of 28-day period. And then I'll also kind of explain more around these use cases later, but having LDOT is also really powerful, because then you can go on and use that to provide liquidity, to lend out on money markets, and to use products, other DeFi products like TDOT that Terry will explain later. Unstaking, one thing I'll call out is that unstaking is not a swap. If you do swap LDOT for DOT, you're risking some potential slippage or kind of like price differences between what you think you should be getting and what you get after that trade. So be sure, if you're unstaking, to go to the liquid staking tab and go to unstake, which is kind of like how unstaking is done. You have a few options. You can stake or you can unstake kind of the traditional way, waiting the full 28 days. You can unstake immediately for a fee, and then you can also choose to unstake kind of in between that if you want to reduce the fee a little bit. And then the original DOT, of course, is returned to you, just like the coat check example, and the LDOT, or that kind of receipt, goes back basically goes back to Acala. We covered pretty much, covered most of these, but I guess a couple that we haven't touched on is, first of all, some of the validators that are serving the LDOT staking pool are names like Coinbase Cloud and Blockdaemon, and these kind of world-class or high-quality trusted validators who are serving, specifically running validators for LDOT. Another piece is just the trust that's been shown already by kind of enterprise grade liquid staking firms. So Alluvial is a liquid staking standard started by a variety of people, including Coinbase Cloud and Figment. And Acala was just chosen as the only team to be serving kind of liquid staking for the enterprises that are going to be using the Alluvial protocol. Betty, why don't I hand this over to you to start talking through kind of what else people can do with LDOT, what different use cases they can use. Maybe you can touch on some of these on the slide, and then kind of move into the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, sure. So I think, as Dan already mentioned, is one of the reasons you use liquid staking is to give yourself a bit more freedom when you do staking. And it's also a lot easier to go through, well, at least liquid staking via Acala, where a lot of things have been automated and things are autonomous on the protocol. And all you need is just to deposit a DOT into the protocol. And then once you've done liquid staking, knowing that the DOT is held as non-custodial, not held by any individual account. It's actually, whenever you stake, it goes directly via XCM onto Polkadot and staked. So that is automatically handled for you. But at the same time, you actually get the freedom of, you get a receipt of the liquid staking that you've just done for the DOT that you staked. And with the receipt, that has residual or derivative value of the DOT that you staked, right? And for that, you can obviously, you can just hold on to it. You can just like do nothing. Then you just continue to receive your DOT staking reward onto your account via the LDOT token. And then you have one more property compared to just stake your DOT. Once you stake your DOT, that kind of stuck in the account. With the liquid staking, because it has you basically tokenized your staking account. By tokenized means the LDOT actually represents how much DOT you have staked, and then also how much reward you're earning. And then with a token, it's liquid, right? So that means if you do want to transfer a part of your staking account into a different account or send it to your friend, you can freely to do so. So with the LDOT token at your balance, you can actually send a portion of that or all of that to another account or to your friends. And then you can actually manage that very easily, right? And also, if you do want to, get out of it, you could just go through the normal route by unstake, which you will wait for however long the unbounding period is, plus a little bit of XCM transaction time. And then on Polkadot, that's 28 days plus maybe a bit. And then on Kusama, that's 7 days plus maybe an error for the XCM to get processed. And you can expect that you will get your KSM and DOT back. But there's also another option there. You can actually get immediate liquidity if you really want to. And that is coming from, you can actually send your request. And then if someone is actually minting LDOT at the same time, you guys can actually match. And then, they get their LDOT, you get the DOT back. If that doesn't happen, because not everyone is minting at exactly the same time as someone else is redeeming, then that gets routed to the swap, and you can actually do a swap in the pool to actually get your DOT back, right? But nevertheless, you're going to definitively get your DOT back regardless. So that's that. And then with the LDOT token at hand, then obviously you're free to use that in different, like in other protocols that are accepting LDOT or integrated with the LDOT. And LDOT is fairly easy to be integrated. It obviously there's money market that can accept LDOT as collateral. You can deposit it and probably earn a little bit of interest if someone else wants to borrow that LDOT that you put in there. So for example, in here there's like Pike Finance. That's one of the local native money markets. There will be other money markets locally and remotely that will be integrated with LDOT. And then another thing is, this will be probably Terry's topic later on, is there will be other sort of protocols like Tapio protocol is one of them that accepts LDOT as a deposit, where it actually creates this stable swap pool between LDOT and DOT and creating the synthetic DOT asset, right? So there will be multiple different derivatives, so you can just like deposit your LDOT into it. It will just manages the liquidity internally, and then you can use TDOT as good as DOT for trading, or use it as collateral. And of course, once you deposit, you are effectively a LP in the stable swap pool, and you're earning trading fees and also hopefully some additional rewards as well. And and then these are only like existing protocols that integrate with LDOT. There will be other protocols that actually build on top of Acala or build alongside Acala, like Parachain dApps that will integrate LDOT, and then you can actually use that fairly easily, right? So yeah, so that's basically what you can do with LDOT. Yeah, so what's shown here is just a graph of Pike Finance, where you are able to kind of deposit your DOT assets to actually earn the interest, right? So obviously, if you deposit DOT, then you'll be thinking about the staking yield that you're supposed to earn. But if you deposit LDOT, at least you are earning the staking yield already. So you're already earning the interest. The staking reward onto your account. And then on top of that, if someone is borrowing against the LDOT, and you also receive interest on top of it, right? So in that way, there's no opportunity cost per se. And at the same time, you are still providing network security to DOT doing your bit. And yeah, and then it's more, I guess, more efficient in terms of cost for both sides. So yeah.
Yeah, I also just wanted to show this slide to kind of connect the dots for people. For many of the people watching, I'm sure you've been following for a while through the process of launching a blockchain, building the LDOT protocol, launching an EVM, now launching Pike, and now seeing all of those things kind of tied together. So you stake your DOT like we just talked about, get LDOT, and then you can take your LDOT into this application built in the Acala EVM Plus, lend out your LDOT on Pike, and earn additional interest or additional yield on that LDOT just for lending it out. So we've been talking about like use cases for LDOT for some time, and really cool to start seeing some of these begin to come to life in the very near future.
So let me just answer one question that's related here. Is there's someone asking, can LDOT devalue, right? So so there are probably two values that you can say for LDOT. One is the fundamental or actual value of LDOT. So there is an exchange rate between DOT and LDOT. So whenever you put in the DOT into the protocol, let's say 100 DOT, there's an exchange rate between the DOT and also the LDOT. It always goes up. So there's always one LDOT can always earn more DOT as time goes by, because the LDOT actually represents the share of the pool, right? And then if the share of the pool stays the same, and then if the protocol continue to earn staking reward, assuming there's no slashing, and then so that's why it's important to pick liquid staking protocol that's got a good validator set, because it doesn't matter how high a yield it's providing, you still have to worry about safety, right? Because once you slash, slashing could affect principal and not just awards, right? So this folks have to be aware of. And so then if the reward keeps continue accruing, then one LDOT will continue to earn more and more DOT as time goes by, right? So this is the real value of LDOT. By real value, I mean when you do the normal redeem, if you wait for the unbounding period of 28 days on Polkadot, 7 days on Kusama, you get exactly that much more of DOT when you exchange it back, right? So this is the real value. And then, of course, if you're doing fancy stuff, right? If you want early liquidity, everyone have to know there's no free lunch. If people promise you there's free lunch, you might be the lunch, right? So by free lunch, I mean if you want early liquidity, either you swap it in the pool or you just like instant redeem. Behind the scene, there's someone else is giving those liquidity. So usually you have to pay, it will be more expensive to actually get those early liquidity. So usually the price there is determined by the market. So how much liquidity is available to provide you those DOT back? And then maybe the pool, if you are exchanging a large quantity, there could be a slippage in the pool, right? And there's transaction fees also included in that transaction as well. So those are your cost essentially for getting early liquidity, right? So and that kind of also is essentially there's no compromises has been made to Polkadot security. Also, no compromises has been made to liquid staking protocol, and to make the whole system is like intact. But someone will have to pay the cost and pay the price. But yeah, so that's what you will get. So there's two values, right? So one is the real value. If you just do the normal stuff, like wait for the unbounding period, and you get the real value out of it. But if you want early liquidity, you do have to pay a small fee. I think you can always compare the liquid market out there. So right now, I think on Kusama, Taiga protocol actually provides KSM and LKSM pool, so you can always see what is the exchange rate. If you want to actually get a certain amount out, is it better to wait, or is it the slippage is good enough for you to actually get early liquidity for the amount that you are trying to exchange, right? So yeah, so that will be, hopefully that explains it. And then when you actually using LKSM or LDOT as collateral, it's always the real and fundamental value is used as the price. So if you put in 1,000 LDOT into Acala, AUSD vault, and you try to borrow, it's always the real value that's being used for calculating your collateral value. And that is the how much actually underlying how much dot that's represented by the LDOT. And then you use the dot market price to calculate the collateral value, because that's, in our case, it's very, I'm sure like people asked us with the context, maybe to STETH, right? It's fundamentally different, because for STETH, there's no real value, because you cannot redeem. So that's why there's, when certain activity happen, it could trigger this like trickle down effect for, STETH, because there's no real or fundamental value. You can't redeem, at least for now, you can't redeem. But for LDOT, it's a very different product. So it can redeem, it has a real and actual value for it. So yeah, so hopefully that explains things. If not, like just keep asking questions and we can explain. Yeah, so the next sort of evolution of liquid staking, I think everyone who's here is early. So you get to experience the non-custodial, the completely open protocol here for LDOT. And then the next evolution is we know where the market is heading, right? I think the recent events of CeFi collapsing and then DeFi protocol holds well. I don't think we're going to stay there, because whenever there's collapsing, you will know there's opportunity. I think there's quite a number of entities, builders, innovators pick up that opportunity is people demand very friendly products, right? That CeFi offers, but people hate the intransparency and closed box or black box way handling users' funds, right? And then if you're smart enough, you spot opportunity there is why can't you have the great UX and then you actually plug your ledger or your books, manage your books on chain in an open ledger. So this is where the institution liquid staking that we launched at Polkadot Decoded with Alluvia Finance it is all about, right? So effectively, when you hear institutional enterprise liquid staking, it actually doesn't mean that enterprise is the end user. It actually means enterprise and institution becomes distributors of the technology that we built here at Web3. So these institutions are folks like exchanges, fintech companies, custodians, alike, and each one of them will have tens of thousands and millions of consumer users that they serve at the jurisdiction that they are compliant with. And some of them even will provide insurance for those accounts, right? And they provide the familiar UX for their customer group. For example, like fintech customers, they probably target a particular sort of age group with a different set of parameters they set to suit those market needs. Similarly to different type of exchanges, right? Some of them are US regulated, then it operates within the US framework, and those consumers are protected, right? So these are distributors, and they plug into this Alluvia finance protocol that Acala is kind of providing technology for. And once they plug into this liquid staking protocol, what we call enterprise or institution liquid staking protocol, then essentially all of those tens of thousands of consumers are staking. And then they can actually track where the funds are going into those protocols. And effectively, Acala and Polkadot are serving all of those customers without them even knowing it. Because if they're actually using a fintech app, it's probably very unlikely they will see a huge Polkadot logo. Well, they'll probably see DOT, but they're probably not going to see a huge Acala logo or Polkadot logo anywhere. But they're actually using Acala tech and also Polkadot tech and actually Web3 tech to power this new product and service that they access. And this is where I think one of the ways that we can actually get to mass market adoption to actually deliver the benefit, right? Because why do you need mass market? You don't just want people to use it, but you want to deliver benefit. The benefit is actually, with this setup, you can see, even though you're still using similar fintech app or maybe exchange app, but with the protocols that are open book, folks can actually track whether it's the Omni account or segregated customer account very easily. So you provide transparency. And then it's also keeping operators like those institutions or fintech apps, they are accountable because you know where their account is being held and how they're managing the funds. And everything is traceable as well, and everything is more open. And these are the properties we actually want out of the Web3 technology, not just this arbitrary, things that we label ourselves as like decentralized and this and that. But you have to deliver those value proposition and create real product market fit to actually benefit people's real life, right? Otherwise, why are we doing what we are doing? So I think, this is still very early. I think people are still getting their head around, but we are already very early pioneering this type of, hybrid finance that we coined it last year. It took, a bit of time for us to get to this point. And then I think this is only the beginning, especially what just happened, in the market. I think it will actually create new hybrid business models for both sides, right? To actually work together to deliver a better solution for everyday people. So hopefully this gives people a little bit of insight into where things are heading. And then very realistically, for this Alluvia solution, it is going to, so folks will need to go through those platforms, whether it's fintech, local providers or exchanges to use this service. And then it's going to create LS DOT, so it's a new type of liquid staking token, and then they're interchangeable, right? On the Acala platform, you get LDOT, you get LS DOT, so they're interchangeable. They can all go into TDOT later, right? To have a synthetic DOT later on to be used as an instrument for lending and borrowing. And then also because we have this architecture of you have institution on one side, you have like pure DeFi on the other side, you can actually swap one to the other, and then you can off-ramp, right? Because like a lot of these distributors or enterprise institution, why do you need them? Because why do you need crypto at the end of the day? It's like once you create economic value, or if you've provided services, for example, for Polkadot security, you do want to realize some of those benefits. Maybe the staking yield, right? You want to take that out and then buy lunch to spend on a credit card or debit card or whatever it is. Then this sort of the enterprise side of things is where it creates a rail, right? For folks to actually kind of like off-ramp in a different way. You can certainly off-ramp directly on the LDOT side as well through AUSD, but you can also very easily, route to the enterprise side. And then if it happens that your preferred fintech provider is also part of this Alluvia finance distribution channel, then immediately your sort of asset will appear in their app and then available on the car, and you can spend it as well, right? So then it creates multiple routes for people going in and out of crypto, and have a more merging and hybrid approach to actually deal with, the fiat world as well as the Web3 world, and also making the Web3 technology that we're building here part of the entire system, right? So so hopefully that helps explain this a bit.
Cool. So last slide. Josh already posted here in the chat the guides for LDOT and LKSM. If you are one of the 3 people who voted that you don't know how to use LDOT, hopefully the presentation today plus these guides help you with how to get started. And then maybe Josh will also paste the Discord link, but our community lives on Discord. All of our official Telegram is muted because Telegram is, in my opinion, nothing but spam and scams. So Discord is where you should go for all the questions and learning that you can get from the rest of the Acala community. So definitely check that out. So now I'm going to hand it over to Terry. I'll let you share your screen. And Terry's going to go through Tapio and TDOT.
Can you guys see?
Yep, got it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so thanks, Dan and Betty, for Thanks, Dan and Betty, for having me to share with your community again. I think I want to take one step back to just summarize the benefits of liquid staking solutions introduced by the Acala team. All of these have been mentioned by Dan and Betty, but I just want to wrap it up and help you guys put a perspective on why it's important to, if you guys are holding DOT, why it's important to leverage the staking solutions, LDOT. So there's a few. Number one, definitely the higher yields. Number two, it unlocks liquidity for the different types of use case, specifically DeFi use cases. Number three, it lowers participation requirements. And then number four, the flexible redemption schedule. For example, supports instant unstaking versus the 28 days unbounding period. So all in all, we feel the Acala's LDOT solution is, number one, very competitive in the overall market. And number two, it just provides DOT holders increased utility as well as flexibility versus staking via the Polkadot JS application. Also, we feel, obviously the Acala team has sort of taken the precedent in terms of defining the standards for staking solutions. And that's also why a lot of other parachain teams have introduced their own version of liquid staking products. And this is where problem starts to occur. And I'm going to cover what are some of the inefficiencies once the ecosystem introduces different versions of staking products. So mainly from our standpoint, when we were building out Tapio 16 months ago, we sort of saw this is going to be an issue. Different parachain teams are going to introduce their own versions of liquid staking products or liquid crowd loan products. I'm not going to touch too much on the liquid crowd loan piece for today's session, but zooming into the problem, mainly I would say there are two identifiable problem. Number one is when the ecosystem has so many different versions of liquid staking products, it creates liquidity silos. So what that means is different parachains, liquid staking DOT solutions is there. Each of them are going to possess different design mechanisms. So, for example, how yields are being accrued, what the unlocking period is. These different mechanisms ultimately is going to isolate the liquidity into limited use case. That's the first problem. The second problem is adoption challenge. So I feel, we as a team feel like obviously Acala is at the forefront at designing the liquid staking solution. In terms of the LDOT volume, it's currently obviously leading the rest of the pack. However, as time moves on, as the Polkadot ecosystem matures, parachain teams that have introduced their own versions of the liquid staking solutions may not be able to catch up. And what's going to happen is, there's going to become category leaders in the liquid staking solutions. And what's ultimately is going to lead to is it's going to create long tail liquid staking DOT in the Polkadot ecosystem. So once you have these long tail liquid staking formats, it's going to make it pretty difficult for application builders to choose which version of the liquid staking DOT to adopt. And basically, like, this further fragmentizes the DOT liquidity in the overall Polkadot ecosystem, despite the fact that the whole purpose of having liquid staking DOT is to enhance utility. It's kind of ironic because, with the different versions introduced by different parachain teams, it's going to, fragmentizes the liquidity overall. And this was the problem that we sort of saw 16 months ago when we were first exploring into the Polkadot ecosystem and working alongside the Acala team. We sort of formulated our solution around, how we can address this potential problem, which we're currently seeing play out. So focusing in on, what is Tapio protocol? So ultimately, Tapio is a synthetic asset protocol, mainly designed to unify different formats of staking and crowd loan derivatives into a highly efficient standard. So in simple terms, what we're hoping to achieve with the Tapio protocol is to aggregate different formats of staking DOT or crowd loan DOT into one standard. And this standard can then be used across the entire Polkadot ecosystem, not only in the Acala parachain, but also across other parachains that have introduced their own staking or crowd loan derivatives. So let's quickly talk about our first product, which is launched on the Acala network 4 weeks ago, TDOT. So TDOT is a unified standard for staking and crowd loan DOT derivatives. How TDOT is composed is basically currently it's backed by a liquidity pool made up of native DOT and DOT and LDOT. So LDOT in our case is we define that as a version of DOT derivatives. And it's the first synthetic DOT launched on Acala. The diagram on the right just basically depicts where TDOT sits. So at the underlying level, you have native DOT like in its respective use case, which is the two biggest application or use case for native DOT asset is crowd loan and staking. And then on top of that, it introduces the staking DOT derivatives, which is LDOT in this case, as well as crowd loan DOT derivatives, which is LC DOT. So where TDOT sits is actually on top of the different formats of derivatives. So the next question might come is, what are some of the benefits of having TDOT? There's a few. Number one is in terms of using DOT as the unit of account, TDOT actually maintains a stable peg against DOT asset. So what that means is you can always redeem TDOT back into either native DOT or LDOT. So if, let's say, you guys are thinking in terms of DOT as the standard unit of account, that also means that ultimately TDOT can always be redeemed back into DOT. In the case that if you're redeeming that back into LDOT, even after going through the 28 days unbounding period, that LDOT can then be turned back into the native DOT asset. So this stable sort of peg mechanism is very important for us when we're designing TDOT. The second benefit is we actually standardize the yield and reward handling process. As I mentioned in the previous slides, one of the problems that we've sort of identified is as different parachains introduce their own staking DOT solutions, they may introduce also a different form of yield accrual as well as unbounding mechanism. So what we're doing is we're standardizing that whole process so that users do not need to worry about, hey, which staking DOT version should I adopt? Whereas you can just basically adopt TDOT because we are basically standardizing the different rewards handling. And that's very important when it comes to, from a user standpoint, how do you actually claim the rewards? So that was the second benefit of having TDOT. The third benefit is actually, being able to provide sustainable and competitive yield. And this is a point that Dan and Betty both mentioned, is with TDOT, because the TDOT is right now being composed of native DOT and LDOT, the staking yield from the LDOT side is actually being accrued back to TDOT. So depending on the composition of the pool, the ideal sort of composition ratio is 60% LDOT and 40% native DOT. So if let's pretend the yield for LDOT right now is 20%. What that means is 60% of that 20% gets accrued back to TDOT as the native yield for TDOT, plus the swap mechanism that TDOT is able to provide, because the actual use case for TDOT is to help facilitate the swap between native DOT and LDOT. And when a user makes that transfer, makes that swap transaction, we actually collect a swap fee. And right now, the entire swap fee is actually being rewarded back to the liquidity providers. So just with these two forms of yield, it's actually very sustainable, much more sustainable than protocols that are purely relying on using their own native tokens to sort of bootstrap the yield. And then with the third piece, which is our own Tapio token, that's also one form of yield which we haven't introduced yet, but that's something that we will be introducing down the line. So just from there, you have three sources of yield associated with TDOT that we could provide to liquidity providers. And then the final use case is highly usable. That's something that that's actually one of our primary objectives of introducing TDOT. Why do we want to introduce sort of like a standardized version with the synthetic asset? Is because we want to make TDOT a universally usable DOT derivative. What that means is whether you are trying to use TDOT on Acala or other parachains, you can, for application builders, that's sort of the standard that they would want to adopt, because we're rolling up, no matter if it's the category leader in terms of liquid staking DOT or the long tail liquid staking DOT, you would be able to just leverage the TDOT standard. And that's also one of the reasons why we expanded into the Pike money market. It's because we want to design Pike and build a money market servicing native DOT assets. So for example, native DOT, LDOT, TDOT, just to create these additional use cases, which I'm going to also talk about in the following slide.
I'm going to chime in here, Terry.
Yep.
Just in your last slide. So this is effectively synthetic DOT, right? For folks who are unaware, I think Ethereum is also waking up to the fact that they need a synthetic ETH. So I think in the last or most recent MakerDAO proposal, they've also proposing, dreaming up a synthetic ETH asset, right? But of course, mostly because they suddenly realize, the world is not just STETH. There are actually, as the Ethereum merge, getting closer and closer, there's actually real multiple derivatives that are going to become available. And then they find there's a real need for synthetic ETH for the underlying, staked assets. So they've just proposed that. But here we go. In terms of the innovation side, the Tapio team has already considered this from day one, foreseeing where the proof of stake protocol can go, and then creating a synthetic DOT asset to solve exactly that problem, right? So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Betty. So this slide basically covers a few specific use cases for TDOT. The first use case, obviously, for those who are familiar, is the stable swap use case. So this is actually live. This use case, you guys can directly leverage this already, which is swapping between LDOT and DOT on the Acala D app. So this is also like one of the ways that LDOT holders can achieve the instant redemption instead of waiting for the 28 days unbounding period. So we're, with the TDOT liquidity pool, we are actually acting as the swap engine between DOT and LDOT. The second use case is different types of DeFi primitives. So as I mentioned earlier, we want to be able to make TDOT as the standard of derivatives that could be integrated across parachains and make it easy to integrate with application builders. So what that means is it opens up a few categories of DeFi applications. So number one, further staking type of application scenarios. The second one is making TDOT as a form of collateral, whether it's for margin trading or any sort of borrowing or lending, which is the third one, for lending use case, which we're building out the Pike money market. And then also something that we're working on right now is making TDOT as a collateral asset to be able to mint AUSD. So these are just to show you guys, different forms of DeFi applications with having that one standard. I can pretty confidently say that, with the long tail staking DOT derivatives, it's very difficult to make those as a form of collateral to mint AUSD because of the credit system. So you guys can understand then, the benefits of having that one standard and then using that one standard to activate different types of DeFi primitives. The third use case is to help optimize liquidity for parachains. So for this use case, I would say we would really be able to experience this when sort of like the category leader starts to pull away, right? What that means is for some parachains that have also introduced their own liquid staking DOT solutions, those solutions may not be able to pick up a lot of adoption or demand. So what's going to happen? It's going to become, long tail liquidity, meaning that not a lot of application builders are willing to support those asset types or those derivative types. So this is where TDOT can come in, because the Tapio protocol can then be deployed on these parachains with the long tail staking derivative liquidity, and we can basically formulate a liquidity pool between native DOT and let's call that Y DOT, okay, the long tail staking derivative. We can formulate native DOT and Y DOT liquidity pool, and with those liquidity combined, that can actually mint TDOT on the Acala platform. And then that TDOT can then be like transferred back for actual use case. So that's liquidity optimization for some of the parachains with long tail liquidity. And that leads to the final use case, which is cross parachain swap. So that example that I just provided, formulating a liquidity pool between native DOT and Y DOT, the long tail staking derivative. Thanks to XDM, we're able to, mint TDOT on the Acala platform, and then once TDOT is minted, that can be transferred back to the parachain with the long tail liquidity. But what this function actually help realize is it's a very natural cross parachain swap that we've just helped perform. So these are so the diagram on the right just basically outlines the 4 different use cases that I've outlined. And I would say, number 1 and 2 is actively being worked on. And number 3 and 4 is when, we believe as the ecosystem kind of matures, that's really going to become a differentiator, because that's where, category leader is going to come up and long tail is going to start to occur. And once long tail starts to occur, you definitely need a solution like TDOT to help unify the long tail. This is the final slide that I want to go through with you guys today. So how does the system actually work? So Tapio protocol is powered by the stable asset system. In very simple terms, the stable asset system is made up of 2 pieces. Okay, at the underlying, we have the stable swap. So this is where, as I mentioned earlier, user can swap in between DOT and the DOT derivative. So in this case, DOT and LDOT, like user can freely swap between that. On top of the stable swap, we have a stable asset that gets generated. So what that means is, from a liquidity provider standpoint, if you're providing liquidity, whether it's native DOT or LDOT into the liquidity pool, instead of getting a normal LP token in return, you would get TDOT, which is our synthetic asset, in return. So, with TDOT, then you can basically, leverage the or utilize the use cases that I've mentioned. So that's ultimately how the Tapio protocol or TDOT functions. At the underlying, we have the stable asset, stable swap engine, and then on top of it, we have the stable asset. One thing to realize, that I've depicted here on the diagram on the right-hand side is the TDOT minting function sits on Acala. That means that we're able to aggregate the different formats of whether it's staking or crowd loan derivatives down the line on other parachains, and using XCM, we're able to transfer that back to mint the TDOT on Acala, and then once the TDOT is minted, that can freely transfer back to the other parachains. The benefit of that is the parachains, other parachains do not lose out on the TVL, because that's, when we were expanding the protocol, that's one of the feedback that we've received. Like at first they were kind of hesitant to be like, hey, it's good that you guys are trying to unify the liquidity, but ultimately, from the parachain standpoint is, do I lose out on the TVL of my long tail, even though there's not a lot of liquidity, even though it's becoming a long tail, but will I lose out on that? So that's also where we kind of continue the innovation of receiving the second Web3 Foundation grant on the stable asset system is, we've designated Acala to be the native TDOT mint, to have the TDOT minting role. But with XCM opening up, the parachains can keep those native DOT and long tail DOT liquidity on their parachains. So we believe, as there becomes, as there are more parachains with their own staking or crowd-owned derivatives, this will really help position TDOT as that unified standard across the entire Polkadot ecosystem. I just want to quickly show, in terms of TDOT, how you guys can actually access it right now. So again, we're deeply integrated with the Acala D app. For those who are not familiar, and if you guys are looking to contribute liquidity, right now the TDOT pool can take in native DOT or LDOT. So you guys can just go directly into the swap function, go into the liquidity, and you will see we have a liquidity pool called DOT LDOT, and it's powered by the Tapio protocol. So you guys can directly contribute liquidity here, or if you guys are just trading between LDOT and DOT, you can also just make a simple swap transaction between LDOT and DOT, and that's ultimately powered by our protocol.
Terry, on the liquidity tab,
yep.
I know you mentioned they can go in with DOT or LDOT. So if somebody wondered, why would I go in with LDOT or DOT, which one would be better? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, so I would say, if you guys don't want to be bothered, if you guys just want simplicity in terms of the operation, then you guys can just go in with DOT. However, if you guys are looking for to help increase the overall yield for TDOT, then I would suggest going in with LDOT, because as I mentioned earlier, the composition for TDOT right now is currently sitting at 55 to 45. So 55% of the pool is made up of LDOT and 45% is made up of DOT. So what that means is 55% of the underlying staking yield from LDOT gets accrued back to TDOT. Okay. If the composition for LDOT becomes higher, our sort of sweet spot range is anywhere between 60% to 70% for LDOT. That also means that a higher percentage of LDOT gets accrued back to TDOT. So that just makes the overall yield higher for all the TDOT holders. So it ultimately comes down to how familiar you guys are with operating the protocol. And one thing that we're working on is how to streamline that process. Like, for example, even for users that are looking to just provide DOT, if we're able to detect the pool to be, hey, you know what, like we can get it back to sort of an optimal rate, we can sort of make a function that helps convert a portion of that into LDOT, then to mint TDOT. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great. So yeah, so this is, for those who are not familiar, this is how you can access TDOT. It's via the swap tab, liquidity function, or just trade in between LDOT and DOT. One thing that I also want to add is the mechanism, the design for TDOT is you're actually not required to. So in the earns tab right now, you can actually see TDOT as being listed as one of the pool for collateral staking. So right now, we can wait for this to load while I speak to it. Right now, because we're going through the whole risk parameter setting for making TDOT as a collateral type for AUSD, there's actually no additional benefits for you guys to make or stake TDOT into this particular collateral staking pool. However, the design mechanism that we've designed on, which also is an innovation, is no matter whether you're holding onto TDOT in your wallet or you've transferred it to a different wallet or you staking, you can always accrue the rewards. So what that means is, so here it is. Here's the card that I was mentioning. Right now, because the collateral, the minting function, against TDOT is not yet open. There's actually like no specific use case for you guys to stake it. And that's also why I want to highlight this point is whether you hold TDOT just in your wallet, you'll still be able to claim the underlying staking yield as well as the swap fees, as well as any additional incentives. That's one thing. That's one very important feature that we want to emphasize is, we really want to unlock the liquidity, because right now, like when we were looking at the Ethereum ecosystem, a lot of protocols, gives you this LP tokens, but they require you to lock this LP token in order to get, just additional staking yield. For us, we don't require you to do that. All you have to do is hold on to this synthetic asset. And with this synthetic asset, you can actually, as other ecosystem develops and integrate TDOT, you can actually use TDOT in other use cases. One specific use case that we're working on is for margin trading with the margin trading protocol. And how you would actually claim the rewards is you can claim the rewards via our own DApp. So you can make the claims directly via our own DApp. It basically accrues the underlying staking yield, swap fees, as well as any of the additional protocol incentives with the address that you're holding on the TDOT. So yeah, like kind of long-winded, but those are some of the key features I would say about TDOT.
Cool. Thanks, Terry. Let's see, Betty, if you want to turn your video back on. I think Terry accidentally left, so let me invite him back. And I see. Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right.
I was going to say, I see, Betty, you've answered a lot of these in text. So,
we can still go through them.
Yeah.
I answer them so that some people can get their answer early.
Cool. All right, so we'll start going through questions. If anyone has questions, please put them in the ask a question box, because that's what we'll use to do that. So I guess, Betty, do you want to go? I know you've written your answers. Do you want to probably go through some of these that you've answered?
Yeah, sure. So I'll pick mostly LDOT related ones and the non-LDOT ones. And I think someone also asking the fungibility palette that I think there's a tweet come out today. People are wondering, we can do a special session for that next week. So we can focus on that one, because otherwise we deviate and it will take a lot of time. So so one of the questions here is, when I stake LDOT, is there any IL, so impermanent loss on the LDOT? So staking has no impermanent loss. Impermanent loss happens when you provide liquidity into swap pools, and usually it's an AMM pool. There's two sides of the token, and then when the token price deviates, you may get impermanent loss. Well, not realized. If you take the liquidity out, then you realize that loss. But if you put it in there, then you don't have implement loss. So that's more to do with AMM pools. So staking doesn't have IL. So I think also one question related to this is, are there risks associated with everything you can do with LDOT? I think this is a very valid question. So the answer is yes, there's always risk. Nothing is without risk. Even you do nothing, there's a risk of not doing anything also. So I'll explain, right? If you like DOT really much and you hold on to DOT, there's also a risk because you are at risk of being diluted by Polkadot inflation, right? And so staking, apart from you're providing security to Polkadot, it's also a way to combat inflation. And of course, a counterexample is ACA and KR token has no inflation, so there's no need to be staked to actually combat inflation, right? And yeah, so I'll say that much. And then the second thing is, okay, so then you say, let's stake. And staking also has risks, right? One of them, more prominent one is slashing risk. It doesn't happen very often so far, but it would happen because when there are poor validators or for some reason the validator runs not the correct code or not being online, when it gets its turn to validate, then it may get slashed, basically penalized by the Polkadot protocol for not doing its job, right? And then if you stake through those validators, then you could get slashed, not just on your reward, but actually it could happen on your principal. So if you put 100 DOT in, you could end up 99 DOT, right? So that could happen. I think there is a calculation there to calculate what the cap might be. You're not going to lose the entire principal, but a certain amount, so that basically a slap on the face for the validator to do their job correctly. So that's why it's important when you choose validator. If you do it yourself, right? That's why it's important to choose good validators. And then when you stick through the Acala and also the Karura LDOT LKSM protocol, there are a number of things that we do to try to optimize that. So when we choose validators, we obviously look at all the on-chain stats. You can actually grab all those are all open, right? You can see what's their slashing history, how long have they been providing validation for the community, and what their history of their, reward would be. Because some of them actually change the reward in the middle of the staking period. And if you don't check all the time, all of a sudden you have way lower of the rewards, even though they may seem to have providing a really good service, because you want an optimum value between reasonably good yield. So don't optimize yield all the way to the highest and forget about the slashing risk. So you want an optimization of good enough yield, but always safe to avoid slashing at all costs, right? At all times. So what we did was, we based on-chain stats for those validators, those open public validators. And then secondly, we introduced a second group is institution validators like Coinbase and Blockdaemon. They can provide slashing coverage. So if there's a slash happen, they cover at least their validator nodes for the losses, right? So that's that. And then third is there's also community validators, right? So they may not be very big, don't have a lot of the validators that show up on the Polkadot list, but they are good diversification, right? They may run on a different infrastructure, and then they're very different from those, more enterprise-like validators now on Polkadot. So hopefully that's going to optimize our risk and reward. But still, this is not without risk. All we can do is, with the knowledge that we have, try our best to actually optimize that. And this is also one of the reasons. Well, of course, beyond that, there's also the protocol, right? So you try to have a protocol that leverage XCM very well to actually be able to do all of this autonomously and through a decentralized way, so that you can actually manage these transactions correctly. So with that combined, this is also one of the reasons why we were picked for institution liquid staking for Polkadot, right? As a technology provider for that, because effectively the enterprise liquid staking protocol is the same as the DeFi protocol. we don't copy it. We can actually create instances and configure it to do so, because we have the ability to kind of provide a more safe and secure way of doing things. Not saying it's perfect, but at least we've got solutions and have like steps to provide a better quality of staking there. So yeah, but if you're doing your own thing, it's the same thing, right? Whether you're doing automatically through LDOT LKSM or you're doing it yourself, it's the same principle that you try to optimize the risk and reward. Yeah, and then someone also asked TDOT risks, right? So maybe Terry, if you're still on, you can talk a little bit about risk of using TDOT.
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, because TDOT sits on top of the different staking or crowd-loan derivatives dot, ultimately the number one major risk of using TDOT is that any of these underlying derivatives fail. And that point kind of goes back to what Betty kind of stressed on earlier, is choosing the credible validators for LDOT is extremely important. And then for us, obviously, then is to choose which type of staking derivatives products to aggregate and roll up into TDOT. That's the number one sort of risk that I think we can have control over. And we obviously have a selection process in terms of choosing like what type of staking or crowd-loan derivatives that we want to enlist in the Tapio protocol. There's also like another question that's like relating to like the price of TDOT. I would say like these questions are kind of similar, like because ultimately what you guys want to figure out is whether TDOT is going to sort of like depeg, or the value of TDOT is just substantially deviates from DOT. So this is also where I kind of mentioned earlier in the presentation is, I'm hoping you guys can try to understand it from the point of TDOT can always redeem back into native DOT or LDOT. So what that means is, if you guys believe that LDOT can be, unbound in 28 days, then TDOT is always equivalent to DOT. However, you don't have
to believe, you can verify it by unbound.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you guys can try it. You guys can try this out. But if you guys are constantly thinking in terms of how does the price work, I think the mechanism that we've introduced, it's different from just saying, price of TDOT is always equal to the price of DOT. Like, it's very hard to wrap your heads around that point, but it's more like, think in terms of DOT as the unit of account. We've proven this to work, on the Thai KSM side, because we replicated this exact same process a couple months ago when we launched Thai KSM. So as Betty said, right, like, you don't have to believe me, go test it out, go try the unstaking, go try the redemption and then unstaking of LDOT and see whether you guys are able to get back DOT.
We may have forgotten mentioning one thing is right now there's incentive on LDOT. There's also incentive on TDOT. Similarly, there's incentive on LKSM and also LDOT, right? So maybe I share the screen. Oh, shoot. What did I do?
Wrong button.
Oh, that's okay. Let's do it. So, is it showing up?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So folks who have done this, if you haven't, you can just easily go to apps.acala network LDOT, or similarly, you can go to the Karura network and then LKSM. So right now you can see one level of additional award. So there's a normal APY. So this is provided by straight staking on Polkadot. It's still slightly higher than average, right? Because of the strategy that we had. And then you've got additional reward there from staking coming from Acala. And then very soon, so this is to do with TDOT, very soon you will be able to have one more layer of reward there coming from TDOT. So you actually, you can go minting TDOT all the way from DOT. So you can go DOT and all the way become a TDOT. Of course, understanding all the risk and how you get out first, but you actually get additional reward here. So essentially, it's all stacked up, right? So at the moment, it's like close to 20%, but once TDOT comes on board here as a reward, then you'll get whatever amount that TDOT provides, and you can do it at one go, right? So hopefully that helps a little bit with the UX as well. So I think that hasn't been launched just yet. So part of the today is actually helping folks to actually understanding what happened in the background, the context, so that when we actually launch this, everyone already can actually jump in and know what they're doing, and then grabbing those rewards with the understood risks, right? So, yeah.
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Yeah, that's something that we're working on the front end to make the whole process more seamless. So there's one question by Mysterian. I think this is actually a good question. Would TDOT still accrue yield if it is on a different parachain? For example, if it is used as collateral on Interlake's BTC vault in the future? Great question. We're actually exploring this right now with the Interlake team. The short answer is yes. We obviously is still able to accrue the underlying staking yield because it's basically made up of the LDOT composition. How we're going to design the claiming process, that's something that we've got to figure out. But the answer is yes. Otherwise, the whole purpose of unifying, different types of staking or crowd loan derivatives wouldn't make sense. It would still be siloed. So yes.
Yeah, so that's a very good use case that we actually didn't mention, because if you use plain DOT to actually mint BTC, that's quite expensive. Because you essentially you're losing 15% already for staking. So either LDOT and then TDOT probably even better for its usability of the price pegging to DOT to actually minting BTC, right? So yeah.
Any other questions you wanted to go through?
I don't think there's any other questions related to TDOT in the Q&A. So I think I should be good.
And Betty's answered
a lot.
The rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone else has a question that you asked that wasn't verbally answered, just go in and check, because Betty's given some thorough answers here. So we've actually gone way longer than expected. So it was really good though. We've had a lot of people join, which is awesome. I'll send a follow-up email out with some just links and resources on some of the things that we talked about today. And yeah, like I said earlier, so the Discord for Acala, and I think for Tapio as well, is the best place to go to get connected and ask questions. We're all definitely learning along the way, so definitely don't ever feel like you can't come and ask any sort of questions. So always happy to help. So yeah, that's about it. So thanks, Terry, for joining. Thanks, Betty, and everybody else for jumping on the crowdcast with us today. This will be posted also on YouTube probably tomorrow. So feel free to check that out for the replay and everything like that. So have a good day or a good night. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here.